Hello, my name is Patrick Allaert. You can reach me on the web with Patrick Allaert with my Twitter account or by my cool@php.net mail address. I am the author of a PKL extension named APM that lets you monitor your environment. So if you want to give it a try and try to have your errors in database for further analysis rather than in a flat file without stack trace and things like that, you can give it a try. I also define myself as a PHP internals enthusiast. I contribute not a lot to say that I'm a contributor. You may have seen array to string conversion. If this broke something on your code, that's because of me. That was my latest contribution. So yeah, cool. And sometimes I am an RFC voter. So new feature, no. No, I sometimes say yes. So we're going to talk about debugging today, but debugging what? There are various things you can debug. You can debug the PHP execution, so really your code, the code that you written. You can debug the system, so the interaction between the code you are writing and the external world. And if we have time, I'm going to introduce network debugging a little bit. However, before we start, what is the most powerful debugging technique? And this debugging technique is named rubber duck debugging. Who knows rubber duck debugging? Hands, please. So it gets pretty popular. And debugging techniques, it works. How many times did you had this happening? You have an issue. You decide to break in on Stack Overflow. Well, no, another question. Who's using Stack Overflow? More hands. Cool. So Stack Overflow is compatible with rubber duck debugging. You decide to bring it on Stack Overflow. You write down your question. Then you realize that it doesn't make any sense. You rethink to ask with enough information. And you realize that you are attacking the problem from the wrong perspective, the wrong angle. And then you start again from scratch to add and find your solution. So how many times did it happen then just when you try to explain to a colleague or to someone else, to your dog or the problem, and suddenly you realize what the problem is just by, did it happen to you? Yes? Plenty of hands. Well, that's like rubber debugging. And I'm really serious about that, because whenever I have to code, I remember some weeks ago I had an issue, and I didn't understood my problem. So Ninja Rubber Duck helped me. Superman Debugger helped me too. And my problem was, I was on my database. I tried to modify something. I had my xdebug breakpoints, and still the data was not inserted into the database. That was really, really difficult bug. So I told my rubber duck, actually that was Ninja one, and I explained the problem. So I'm connected to the database, and when I'm talking about the problem to this duck, yeah, but are you connected to the right database? Yes, I'm connected on production. Shit. So that was the problem. So sometimes, because the rubber duck is just asking stupid question, sometimes it helps, because you may try to find the solution at a different place. I was just connected on the wrong database, so my code worked. But the rubber duck helped me. There is various kind of debugging tool like giant rubber ducks. Apparently, it works with real ducks. So if you take a real duck and you talk the problem to him, apparently it's supposed to work. You can use dead ducks. I haven't tried this. I promise. Yeah, plenty of rubber ducks. And I also bring with me, this is for you later, guys. After the conference, feel free to use a rubber duck with you. I have green ones, yellow ones, blue ones. This is for you. Little gift. Or maybe I'm going to throw them. That can be fun too. But unfortunately, this is really a lovely tool, but it doesn't solve all problems yet. No, this has nothing to do with Microsoft security issues or no, not at all. So before that, sometimes you really have issues. So you want to debug. The quick and dirty way, I cannot avoid that one. It's die. Just, I want to know if I pass by this piece of code. So I put a die. If I do my test again and I have a different result, it just stops. OK, I'm passing to this point. Sometimes I just rework the die, and in front of it, I'm having a var dump just to see what happens. This works very well. That's very efficient, because you don't need to recompile PHP, and that's why it's awesome. Of course, you have Xdebug. And in the abstract, I mentioned that I was not going to see Xdebug. Not that it's powerful, but it's super powerful, and I expect you to already use Xdebug. It's very good. When do you use Xdebug? If it happens that you have 5 or 7 die in your code with plenty of var dump, and it's the 10th time you are reloading the code, so maybe it's better to have a breakpoint in your code, because there, die and var dump's not going to help. So thanks. Xdebug turns 15 years old, I think. So thank you, Derek. Another one is PHPDBG. Who knows about PHPDBG? Knows. So who's use it? No hands. OK. So PHPDBG is included by default since PHP 5, if I remember correctly. And it's, if you have PHP in command line, chance is and you have PHP 5.5 minimum, chance is high that you also have in the command line PHPDBG. And it's a super powerful and native PHP debugger, but that works differently than Xdebug. It doesn't replace Xdebug. Xdebug is very good. Use it. In my slides, they will be available soon after. I'm having examples, but I'm also demonstrating the work of PHPDBG in live. It's because I like live problems. So I'm going to test a little script here. I have a function with the greetings, and I code the output of greetings. So if I want to run PHPDBG on this one and try to run the code, what I'm going to do? Everybody can read this, what I'm typing? Yes? So I just do PHPDBG, test.php. So now PHPDBG environment is prepared. The code is not run yet. If I just say run, then I can see my hello world. If I want to print and list the source code, I can list and then parameter some parameters, and I have my functions. I can also print some specific functions. If I want to print detailed information about the function greetings, for example, oh, that's a little bit messy, so I'm going to do that again. OK, now it fits the window. Here I can, for example, see the PHP bytecode that is run behind the scene. So your code is transformed to bytecode. You're supposed to have an opcode cache if you care about performance. And those are the instructions that are going to, the operands that are going to be run. So PHPDBG can show you this. You saw, going to list the source code again. So you see, hello, I assign it to variable hello with double quotes, and world with single quotes. So you know there is a speed difference between single quotes and double. Who knows that? Who knows that there is a speed difference? OK, a few of you. Who knows that this is a complete myth and that it is not true? OK, so you have to agree, guys. Is it true or is it not true? So, well, we can figure out. In fact, if you care about the performance, really, you have an opcode cache. Otherwise, it just doesn't matter. And when you print your code operands, you're going to see that in all cases here it's dumped like with double quotes in all cases, because when parsing your strings, whatever you had variables into it or not, this is the result you have, and you're going to have exactly the same code operand. And this is why it cannot be true that single quotes are faster than double ones. It's not because in double quotes you can have variables and string interpolation that those are faster. It really doesn't have any difference, trust me. And do it with an opcode cache, of course. So I mentioned it was debugger. I had some code here. How can I work with this command line debugger? I can, for example, put a breakpoints. So if I want to break on line 4, I just write break 4. I want to run the code. Here I am. The debugger stopped on line 4. Is about to execute it. It's not run yet. I can step. By the way, I have the opcode that are run at that moment. I can do next if I don't want to step into. Now I'm the next line. And I can even modify the current behavior of PHP. So for now, if I EV is for like eval. If I want to evaluate hello, hello contains hello, but I can also dynamically modify it. And if I try to continue running my code, then I can see that instead of hello world, I have modify world. That's kind of debugger on steroids. It's very interesting. If you have something that is remote in command lines, you want to reproduce, you don't want to set up tunneling between your IDE and your server, sometimes PHPDBG is really handy. And one thing that, thanks to Nikita blogged about it, I don't know if Nikita is here, PHPDBG can also be called with -p star, then your script, and it's going to dump the opcode without entering the debugging environment, just showing the opcode so that you can compare whether version A of your code or version B is smaller in terms of smaller opcodes, normally is faster. Take this as a general rule, but might be different. Question on this one? No, I'm taking question later. PHPDBG comes with many commands. I just wrote a few of them. But if you want assistance while debugging, you just type help. And you're going to have help on the commands. You can also type help next, help run. And then you have extra parameters and arguments. That's not difficult to get. So that was the example I showed. It will be, you can break points on a function, on a line, on pretty much everything, also including on a specific opcode. PHPTrace. Who have heard about PHPTrace? No one. Oh, that's interesting. I think it's the first time no one heard about it. PHPTrace is a low overhead tracing tool. So it means you can run it on production. What it does, in this case, I'm going to launch PHP code on the command line, and I just have a loop, and I'm sleeping, like some of you. Okay, that's done. I have a number here, 9954. Now I want to launch PHPTrace. I want to know the status of my process 9954. And whoa, that's really, yeah, it crashed because I didn't put, it's not supposed to crash, but I can use -p to mention process ID. And at the moment I wrote, so my process is still running, but at the moment I did PHPTrace, it tells me what's the current status of this running process. So for now, it's in up. So I have the version of the PHP, I have the memory peak, real memory usage, and so on. And I also have the current stack trace where it's working on now. If I want to follow this, follow the progression, I can see that I'm attached to my environment, and now I can see exactly what function is getting called, and the performance penalty only exists at the moment you attach to it. If you don't have a PHPTrace process, your code goes as fast as it can. As soon as you are opening it for debugging purpose, it's only at that moment then you're going to have a little bit of slowdown. Not like running Xdebug in production. That's not a good idea. So PHPTrace works mostly on the command line, but you can also get the result from the network. Again, the example will be available in my slides. System debugging. Now I finished the PHP part. STrace is probably the most common tracing tool in Linux. When you want to trace what happens between an application and the operating system. So whenever you open a file, you're doing a fopen, it's not your application that is going to open directly on the disk, the file. It asks a service to the operating system, gives you a file handle, and then you can do something. You can read on it and so on. So there is a communication between your application and your operating system. This communication mostly happens with system calls. System calls is something which is lower level than what you see in PHP. So you may have one function in PHP and having 5, 10 system calls behind the scene. So I'm going to demonstrate that with a pretty simple ls.php file. I'm going to open it here. So this is, you all know the ls command in Linux. Show you a list of the directory your content of the directories. This is the same but written in PHP. And this is for later. This is under command. If I just run this, I have a kind of ls output. The output is not sorted, so you may have dots in the beginning, in the end. STrace can be used just before your command. So if I want to know what happens when I open, so PHP, no, that's not, PHP ls.php, okay. And now I want to prefix that with STrace. And now I have all the names of the functions that happens between PHP and my application. So what happens here, for example, I can see that I am, all those names correspond to a specific system call. And most of the time, the more you have system calls, the slower your code is because you have IOs. So IO time can be seen with STrace. This is too much information. I cannot handle this. So STrace provides a filtering mechanism. For example, I want all system calls that are in the file category. So all file manipulation. If I just do this, I have much less output. And I can see that the ls, in fact, is triggering this open. It opens the current directory. It receives a file descriptor. So if you try to look at what your resource, your fopen or your execution would give you, it would give you a 4. That's the 4 I have here. And then this is the regular output of my script. if I am adding, no, I'm not going to add anything here. So system calls, it means everything related to networking, file modification, opening. If you require one file from another, you're going to see system calls between those. If you want to have a summary of all the system calls, you can also use strace -c. And so you have a diagram of the number of, not a diagram, but a table with the number of usage of every system calls. This is really informative. Don't do this on ls.php. It's pretty useless, but on a live request, that's going to be handy. LTrace is very similar to strace. It's a little bit more complicated to process because LTrace is not between your application and the it's not about monitoring the system calls, but the library calls. You know that PHP use a lot of external libraries. So when I run PHP on the command line, on my system, it's running usr bin PHP. If in front of that I do LDD, I'm going to see, yeah, this is way too big. Doing it again. Here I can see that PHP is linked to the libm. For example, this is for mathematical purpose. You can also see things related to curl or libpthread, libgdbm, and so on and so on. Those are C libraries where PHP didn't reinvent everything. So instead of this, it links to those shared libraries like DLL under Windows to benefit from existing code. So if you want to dump what exists in your code between those files, you can use LTrace for that. Almost the same syntax than strace. Okay, here I have an empty file. As you can see, it is completely empty. If I perform an LTrace on, for example, the libcurl.so.4.php, .so.4, and I run php empty, I'm going to see that the libcurl library is going to be initialized with many different calls, even if I'm not using curl inside my request. So it means that the more features you are loading to your PHP, so if you have curl, zip, some other extension, all of them may try to do and initialize some things into the libraries. So try to have a PHP that is as minimal for performance reasons. You can also run LTrace without a specific library, but even for an empty file, this is going to be very, very verbose. Inotify. Inotify, you know SPL, not SPL observer, but the observer pattern, or even dispatcher. It's a mechanism where you want to attach an event, there's an event triggered, and you want to be aware of something. The same thing exists in Linux. In the Linux kernel, there is a mechanism that lets you know when a file or a directory has been accessed, modified, opened, and so on. And it means that you subscribe to the kernel. I want to know when this file changed, instead of trying to polling every second or every half second and fast if the file changed. This is not efficient. The idea is I want to register and to know whether this file, when this file is getting something. And for this, you also have command line tools with Inotify. I'm presenting two of them. Inotify wait. So here I'm going to, yeah, I thought you were blind, but you're not. That was much bigger than expected. So Inotify wait. The important thing here is -r, because I want to watch recursively this directory. Okay, my watch are set up. So the kernel, the Linux kernel, is aware that I want to watch everything happening here. And it doesn't cost anything just for doing that. It's because not busy waiting. Now I'm in the same directory, and I'm just, for example, wrote ls. Just by doing ls, I can see that already 3 kind of operations have been performed on the files that I have here. I'm putting some additional lines. Now I want to do PHP and run the test.php. Here what I do, tab completion. Oh, I just hit the tab, and because the tab uses completion, and because the completion want to know what is inside this directory, even when you hit a tab, you have some code that's getting triggered behind the scene. So if I'm running php.test.php, I can see, for example, so the output started for this one here. It opens, it accesses it, then he closed it, but it also opened required.php and closed it too. You can register on a specific event. So if you want just to be aware of when a delete operation on a file has been performed, this is possible with Inotify. So Inotify wait as for having a direct notification whenever something happens. But you also have Inotify watch with -r recursive. And here I can do plenty of things like ls or find or running test.php several times. And when I quit the environment here, I have a collection of by directory and possibly by files of number of operations on all of them. That's the second tool that is part of Inotify command line tools that are really handy. So Inotify is native Linux, so it's most probably 99% chance if you have a decent and recent kernel version, you already have Inotify. What you may not have is the Inotify wait and Inotify watch command lines. For those, you need some extra tools. Just look in, they are available in all Linux. Inotify tools or Inotify CLI, depends on your distribution. MySQL Proxy, I guess most of you are using MySQL or MariaDB. Sometimes I want to really know what happens between my application and MySQL. MySQL or MariaDB provides more and more information in their information schema, but sometimes you want to interact more with natively with between the communication. So do you really know what happens? I'm just giving a quick example with MySQL Proxy. So MySQL Proxy, it's a tool, a command line tool, that I can run with a custom script. Without a custom script, it doesn't make any sense. But okay, now it's run. What it means is now I just created the MySQL Proxy. It listens on port 4040 by default. And now what I can do is, instead of connecting my application to my database server, I'm connecting to this one. And this one in turn is going to connect to the MySQL server. And in between, I have a script. This script is debug.lua. Debug.lua is just echoing the various SQL, but with some additions. So let's see. I have here my conception test on an application I'm working on. If I trigger this, I start seeing all the queries that happens between my application, and that's a lot of queries. So I'm going to interrupt codeception test. And what I did in the Lua script is just printing the actual query, but I have plenty of information available directly in the protocol. For example, if an index was not used by the script, I'm writing the query in yellow. So this one didn't use any index. I also have the number of rows. When I have a number of rows that is, I'm printing the number of rows here. 1, for example, here this one give 5 results. If I want to print the results, that's also possible. I just didn't do it, otherwise it's too big. But I can print the number of time was spent, the number of rows. If there is no rows affected by an insert, update, or delete, maybe it's the sign that something might be buggy. So this is why I put it in red. And everything that is showed here is just a kind of simple script that you can do. All the scripts are on GitHub on my account, so you're going to have the link after that. So I'm opening. So the scripting language for MySQL Proxy is Lua. So what I'm trying to opening it. Okay, that's one of them. I'm going to take a simple one. Debug blind. This is a script without colors handling. It's simpler to read. So as you see, this one is just about to fetch the query in memory. So you don't. This is a kind of copy paste, and then you can play with it. And for example, if you have a flag like no good index, then you display no good index. If you have a row count and you want to display the number of row counts, just display it. There is plenty of Lua scripts available if you want to see the most frequent queries, the ones that doesn't use an index, the ones that have syntax errors, the one that use double quotes. Remember, in SQL you are supposed to use single quotes always, otherwise you depend on the SQL mode. If you want to debug all of that, feel free to use the script. Another script that I created, which is quite interesting just to know how it's going to be in prod. You have SSD, you have a local MySQL, you're the only one user, so normally you shouldn't have any slow page. This script is going to add between, so it's almost a one-line script. I'm going to have a OS execute sleep call between each queries. And this is slowing down my database. And that's really handy, because if you have an application that does a lot of queries and becomes slow because you have a lot of queries on your system, this is a way to emulate a very slow database. And feel free to hack the number of milliseconds you want to wait, or making it dynamic, random, whatever. You can do this for pretty everything. So example, printing all the queries, the ones not having index. If you have queries that you want to log after it takes more than 2 seconds, for example, just create a if condition. Here, the slide I will tweet on my Twitter account. I'm going to tweet the slides soon so that you will be able to find the MySQL Proxy scripts for devs. Nethogs, it's a very simple, top. Top is to find which process exists and which one is the most heavy. On your server, you may want to know which is the process that takes the more network bandwidth. So if you have a process that is transferring a lot of data, you have a movie, Nethogs is like top for the networks. And here I cannot use and demonstrate Nethogs, but it's pretty the same output. It's just because I don't have a cable and I don't have Wi-Fi. But otherwise, if you have an existing interface that is available, NetHawk is going to show you exactly what process is taking your bandwidth. Extremely simple tool. I guess I don't have the time for a MySQL proxy. I have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to take the question because it's a shorter version of this conference. So I'm going to take the questions now, and if you have questions regarding MySQL proxy, Wireshark, and how to use it, feel free to ask me anytime.